The Sinister Radio Broadcast that exposed hidden horrors and incited a terrifying mass panic. Sarah, a weary 33-year-old single mother, had given her all to the small suburban town of Oak Ridge. Every night, she clocked in late at the diner, fatigue etching lines in her face as she poured coffee and served dishes, all while her heart ached for her two kids, Ethan and Lily. They were her world. Yet the weight of bills and worries pressed on her, each day like a shadow creeping closer, ready to pounce. That night, after a grueling shift, Sarah found solace in Ghosts of Oak Ridge, a late-night radio show that felt like the perfect escape. At first, she chuckled at the outlandish tales of spectral figures roaming their tree-lined streets. Disappearances, haunted houses, and warnings from long-gone residents filled the airwaves. But as the clock ticked past midnight, an icy chill settled in her chest. The show painted a vivid picture of darkness enshrouding their home, shimmering under the moonlight. Her laughter faded, replaced by the echo of the host's voice, weaving a sinister web of the past. Stories shared around flickering campfires had seemingly seeped into her regular routine, turning the mundane into potential horror. Outside her window, the shadows danced with unsettling familiarity. Even the quiet cul-de-sac took on a menacing tone, as if each of her neighbors hid a secret worth fearing. "What were you thinking, Sarah?" She scoffed at herself, pushing the fear away. But it lingered, like the scent of burnt coffee. Suddenly, her laughter felt naive, foolish even, as whispers of ghostly figures haunted her thoughts. Why did it feel like the entire town was crossing its fingers behind closed doors, terrified of becoming the next story featured on the chilling broadcast? Then came the night Ethan and Lily woke screaming, soaked in sweat, claiming they saw someone outside. As shadows clawed at their innocence, Sarah dismissed it as childhood nightmares, but doubt gnawed at her. As the weeks rolled on, every friendly hello felt heavier, every smile turned sour. Even Mrs. Thompson, once a trusted ally, darted her eyes away. Her gait hurried past the house. Before long, worrisome numbers piled up at the diner. Families locked doors earlier, paranoia crowding their gazes. The whispers of the broadcast had seeped deeper, infecting hearts and minds. It was a viral panic that spread faster than she could comprehend. The air felt charged with caution. The hum of tension ignited the diner that night. Sarah poured coffee nervously, the scalding liquid slipping through her fingers. Someone mentioned a beloved schoolteacher who had disappeared, rumors rippling like a shockwave through the community. A chill trailed her spine as she listened, her heart racing. This teacher had once guided Ethan's small hands. They were toyed with fear now, no longer safe under the very school they relied on. Panic tightened its grip as Sarah imagined losing her children to the dark. She began forming plans in her mind, ways to escape if the shadows decided to swallow them whole. Yet as she plotted her escape, it happened. The knock on the door echoed through her heart. A neighbor, someone she once trusted, stood silhouetted in her doorway. The door creaked open. Her breath hitched, fear bubbling in her throat. She was teetering on the edge of discovery. What could they possibly want now? As she locked eyes with the figure, an unsettling thought lingered. Was this neighbor truly who they seemed? The whispers were rising outside. Her children murmured in the background, "Mommy, why did they come?" Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue. As the door swung open wider, her children clung to her, whispering urgently about the danger lurking in the stranger's eyes. Behind that friendly facade, something dark and twisted lay in wait. Paranoia crashed like waves inside her mind. With nowhere to run, she had to face whatever secrets Oak Ridge was hiding. What kind of monster lurked behind the facade of her once safe suburban life, and would revealing the truth shatter everything she held dear? Sarah's heart raced as the neighbor stepped closer. The figure, Mrs. Hargrove, had always been a comforting presence, a blue-rinsed silhouette of baked cookies and cheerful gossip. But now, her smile felt too wide, her eyes glinting in the dim light, as if they held secrets far more menacing than any radio tale. "Sarah, dear," Mrs. Hargrove whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "We need to talk. It's urgent." The air grew thick. Ethan and Lily whimpered, pressing against their mother's legs. Sarah's instinct screamed at her, urging caution. She forced herself to breathe through the dread knotting in her stomach. "About what?" "About the children." Mrs. Hargrove's voice dropped lower, almost suffocated by the tension in the air. "I don't think they're safe anymore. There are things happening. Things we can't ignore." The unsettling weight of her words hung between them, unbearable. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Hargrove's smile flickered. Her gaze darted again to the shadows beyond the porch. "You've seen how things have changed, haven't you? Families going missing, strange noises in the night. You might think it's just hysteria, but it's so much worse." Sarah felt the chill in her spine deepen. Could she trust this woman? As a mother, every protective instinct screamed to believe, yet something whispered in her ear a warning against the unknown tangled in Mrs. Hargrove's voice. "Please, just tell me what you know," Sarah urged, her voice trembling slightly, hoping for clarity. The fear in her children's eyes became unbearable. "There's a meeting at the Old Oak Community Center tonight," Mrs. Hargrove said urgently. "They're calling it a neighborhood watch, but it sounds more like a witch hunt. They want to find something or someone that's been causing all this fear." Ethan and Lily gasped at the mention of danger. "Don't go." Ethan pleaded, his small hands gripping Sarah's thigh. "We'll go," she said more firmly, pushing back the waves of anxiety. "But I have to know what we're up against." Mrs. Hargrove's expression darkened, her mouth tightening into a grim line. "You don't understand, Sarah. It's not just tales. They may expose something that should never see the light of day." Before Sarah could respond, a loud crash echoed through the quiet night like 1,000 doors slamming shut. A creeping dread settled in the pit of her stomach. "What was that?" Lily whimpered, eyes wide, scanning the darkness outside the comfort of their doorway. "Just the wind," Sarah whispered, trying to soothe her, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her unease. But the neighbor's eyes widened further, filled with panic she could no longer contain. "We need to hurry. They're coming." With a deep breath, Sarah looked at her children, their faces a canvas of confusion and fear. She had to make a choice. The shadows that had crept into their lives were growing deeper, and now they threatened to swallow them whole. "Let us get to the community center," Sarah finally said, voice steady but heart racing. They stepped out into the night, the chill biting at their skin. It felt different. This wasn't home anymore. As they joined Mrs. Hargrove, their footsteps echoed against the pavement. The distant crowd murmured with fear, a gathering storm of neighbors confronting the unspoken horrors hidden beneath their idyllic lives. But as they walked, the walls of the houses around them seemed to whisper secrets, old and twisted, watching, waiting. What were these dark things lurking in the periphery? And would they find protection in numbers, or would they awaken something far worse? With every step toward the community center, shadows flickered in the corners of her vision, hinting at unseen watchers. The dread clung to her, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just walking into a meeting, but something far more sinister. What had they really summoned into the open with their gathering? The community center loomed ahead like a dark fortress. Its windows were lit, but the glow offered no warmth, it felt like a spotlight on an impending crime. As they got closer, the low hum of whispered conversations curled around them, anxiety palpable in the air. Ethan tightened his grip on Sarah's hand. "Mom, I don't like this. It'll be okay, honey. Just stay close," Sarah replied, her own heart thundering in her chest. She could sense Mrs. Hargrove's protective urgency, but darker shadows brewed in her mind. They stepped inside, the door creaking as if reluctant to let them in. Muffled voices bounced off the walls, filled with worry and resentment. Families huddled in tight knots, casting sidelong glances at newcomers, their faces etched with fear. Who were they looking for? What unknown terror prowled just out of sight? "Get in line," Mrs. Hargrove muttered hastily, nudging them toward the back of the room. The air inside crackled with nervous energy, each word spoken enveloped in unease like a bomb waiting to detonate. At the front of the hall, a figure stood behind a makeshift podium, an old man with wild gray hair and deep-set eyes that glittered with panic. "Listen up," he shouted, rough around the edges, like his voice had seen it all. He held an old radio in one hand, crackling and spitting static. "We're not here to spread fear, but we must face the truth. The children are the key, and they the ones who went missing aren't just gone. They've been." His voice trailed off, something heavy dragging his words into a silence that swallowed them whole. Suddenly, the radio crackled, and a harsh voice erupted from it, ripping through the silence. "The forest watches. The forest knows. It calls for them." Fear pulsed through the room, electrifying the air. Gasps echoed as eyes widened. Whispers turned to shouts, accusations flew among neighbors. "What does that mean?" someone yelled. "This is insane. Let him speak." Another voice countered. "We can't ignore the warnings." Sarah's heart thudded louder, drowning out the chaos. What about Ethan and Lily? Kids were missing. Had they heard the radio? Did it know her children? She glanced down, they were staring at her with wide, terrified eyes. "Mom!" Lily whispered urgently, tugging at Sarah's shirt. "I want to go home." Before Sarah could comfort her, the front of the room erupted again. "They're coming for us!" the old man screamed, shaking with intensity. "They've come to take what is theirs." The crowd descended into chaos, accusations flying like arrows, fingers pointing blame. Dread settled deeper into Sarah's bones. This was not just panic, it was desperation. And desperation begged for sacrifice. "Outside. We need to warn others." Mrs. Hargrove shouted, pushing the crowd back. "Don't let them." Then, it happened. The lights flickered and then went out, plunging the room into pitch blackness. A deafening crash echoed, followed by the anguished screams of those who had lost their balance, the tight containment of fear bursting like an overripe fruit. Moments later, distant voices returned, but not from the crowd. Something else came, a low, mournful sound that reverberated through the walls. The eerie tone curled into our minds, sending shivers down their spines. It was a song, ancient and twisted, calling to them, beckoning from outside. "Stay here," Sarah ordered, but panic gripped the room like a predator. People surged toward the exits, their instincts screaming for safety. But safety felt like a mirage, shimmering yet out of reach. "Stop!" Sarah shouted, her voice barely slicing through the noise. "We can't just..." But before she could finish, Ethan's scream pierced through them like a dagger. "Mom! Look!" Sarah turned. Shadows danced outside the community center like phantoms, their movements jerky and unnatural. They began to emerge from the tree-lean figures with faces obscured, their features distorted in the moonlight, a grotesque parade of horror. "Run!" Mrs. Hargrove shouted, her voice threaded with a raw edge of panic, and the crowd erupted into frenzied motion. In that moment, Sarah was faced with a ghastly choice. Would she push through the crushing crowd to grab Ethan and Lily, or would they all be taken by whatever was lurking outside? When the figures advanced, the truth hit Sarah like a cold wave. They weren't just a gathering, they had unknowingly called forth a nightmare. "Keep close, kids!" she screamed, instinctively shielding them. But as the crowd surged, she realized safety was crumbling, and nothing could stop the horrors that lurked in the dark. What was waiting for them outside? And would they still be a family when the night ended? People stampeded toward the exits, a stampede of fear, crashing against each other like a human wave desperate for the shore. Sarah barely had time to react. She yanked Ethan and Lily toward her, shielding them with her body as the chaos swirled around them. Pushing through the throngs of flailing arms and wild eyes, each face twisted into a mask of panic, became a frantic and desperate struggle. "Stay behind me!" Sarah shouted, her voice strained against the cacophony of terror. But as she moved, the shadows outside grew sharper, contours almost human in their malevolence. They were getting closer, slinking toward the building with an unsettling gliding motion. Sarah felt a choking fear clawing at her throat. "No, no, we need to get out." The crowd churned, and as they reached the door, a woman in a tattered dress, eyes wide with terror suddenly stumbled back into them, a ghostly wail escaping her lips. "They're coming! They're here!" The panic surged anew as people fought to get past her, hearts racing wildly. "Mom, please!" Ethan whimpered, clutching her waist tightly. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She glanced back, desperately seeking an opening, a way out. Then, the radio crackled again, a sinister whisper snaking through the hall. "Follow the call, come to the forest." The words lapped at their minds, igniting a primal instinct to flee. It was a grotesque lullaby, calling out from the shadows, weaving its way into their thoughts like an insidious poison. "Don't listen to it," Mrs. Hargrove cried, her voice hoarse. "Fight it. Get to the door." But the whispers grew louder, wrapping around Sarah like serpents. She could feel the pull towards the shadows, towards the unknown lurking in the night, just beyond the door. Her vision blurred briefly as the awful images of the missing children flickered in her mind, frozen smiling faces, eyes wide open in horror. Where had they gone? In a moment of clarity, she locked onto Lily's terrified eyes. "We have to go. Now." With a fierce surge of determination, she pushed through the last of the crowd. The door felt like a gateway to salvation, but as she reached for the handle, an unnatural chill swept through the air. The door swung open, tumbling outward. Blinded momentarily by the moonlight, Sarah squinted into the night. And then she froze. Figures had emerged from the shadows, pale and emaciated, their skin gleaming with a sickly sheen. Hollow cheeks, sunken eyes, grim smiles stretched too wide. It seemed they were waiting for her. For them. "Mom, I don't want to go out there," Ethan shrieked, gripping her tighter. The sound did nothing to alert others. Those around them seemed entranced, swaying ever so slightly, drawn to the figures that beckoned. "Mom!" Lily's voice trembled. "They're staring at me." As if responding to her fear, one of the figures took a step forward. It held out a hand, fingers long and crooked, beckoning with a slow, sinister motion. "Come to us, join us," it crooned, voice slithering like smoke, wrapping around the corners of Sarah's mind. "No!" she shouted, the word escaping like a breath of fire as she yanked her children back. "Get back! Get back!" But deep down, she felt the tug and insistent pull toward that horrifying promise. The fear twisted into a thread of bizarre curiosity. What did they want? Were they lost too? The air crackled with tension. The figures stepped forward, and with each movement, her heart raced faster. The community center seemed to groan under pressure, walls vibrating, the very foundation of reality shaking as chaos ebbed and flowed. In that moment of despair, Sarah realized the weight of the truth: they were not just hunted, they were desired. "Run!" She jerked back, forcing her legs to move. "We need to find help." But as she turned with Ethan and Lily, other parents stood frozen in place, their expressions slackened, lost to the night. The figures loomed closer, and the howling song of the eerie radio filled the air, wrapping around them. As she bolted into the moonlight, the full horror of the night unfurled before her. Shadows shifted, breathing a life of their own, an unseen hand grasping at their heels. And then she thought, what if the whispers didn't just want her children? As she sprinted into the dark, heart pounding, a scream echoed through the night. Was it just the winds or more? The darkness only deepened, the lurking presence growing. What was out there, drawn to them? What did the forest truly hunger for? The darkness closed in around them as Sarah sprinted, the chilling scream still reverberating in her ears. Moonlight flickered through the trees just ahead, casting long shadows that seemed to twist and curl, creeping closer with every step. She had to stay focused, had to keep running, her heart hammering in her chest like a drum in a funeral procession. "Mom!" Ethan's small voice called out, shaky and filled with dread. "I can't see anything. Just hold on tight." Sarah shouted back, her pulse racing. She felt Lily clinging to her arm, nails digging into her flesh, and it almost felt reassuring. They were still together, a small unit fighting against an encroaching tide of terror. As they tore into the tree line, the breath of the night felt heavier, almost suffocating. The air shimmered with an unnatural energy, vibrating like the sound of the radio that had summoned this dread. "Do you hear that?" she murmured, glancing back toward the community center, now just a distant silhouette against the rising moon. The whispers had morphed into a full-on cacophony in her mind, a symphony of fear that urged her to join the figures that had wanted to ensnare them. "Mom, I can hear it." Ethan's voice trembled, his eyes wide with panic. "What do we do?" "They're coming." She inhaled sharply, and the sharp pine scent clawed at her senses. "We need to get away from here." Far away, but even as she spoke the words, an unsettling thought took root in her mind. Were they even running in the right direction? The forest loomed like a labyrinth, branches reaching out, gnarled and twisted, a fortress of shadows with the whispers trickling like poison between the trees. Sarah felt the familiar prickle of fear crawl down her spine. Each step further into the depths felt like a step deeper into madness. "Mom," Lily whined, her breath coming in quick bursts. "What's wrong with everyone? Just keep moving." Sarah snapped, though uncertainty gnawed at her. The others in the community center had looked so lost, so entranced. Could the same fate await them? The ground beneath them was uneven, roots snagging at their feet as if trying to trip them up. A sudden rustling broke through the eerie quiet, and Sarah skidded to a stop, her heart in her throat. The trees seemed to whisper, their leaves rustling in a secret language, and then she saw a flash of movement just beyond the reach of the moonlight. "Did you see that?" Ethan asked, his voice a strangled whisper. "Yes." She breathed, gripping her children tighter. "Keep close." But the shadows moved again, blurring at the edges, blending with the dark like they were alive. As if reading her fear, one of the figures, now more defined, lunged out from the shadows. Its face twisted into a grotesque mask of hunger. "Come now, join us," it cooed again, the voice slithering closer, echoing through Sarah's mind and drawing her into the depths of its horror. "No!" Sarah screamed, blocking out the seductive lure. "Run!" They propelled themselves deeper into the forest, branches clawing at their clothes like ghosts reaching out for their souls. The night became a blur of movement and sound, their breath jagged and frantic. "Mom, I can't," Ethan gasped, but Sarah cut him off. "Don't you dare stop. Keep going." Her mind raced, processing the wild surge of thoughts. What was happening to the others? Could they be pulled into the same fate? With every heartbeat, the whispers grew louder. Were they pushing them? Were they hunting them? Or was it something worse? Sarah burst into a small clearing, the ground suddenly flat beneath them, and the moon poured its silver light overhead. But relief turned to terror as she scanned the edges of the clearing. She entered a new arena, surrounded by trees that were now covered in dark, shifting figures. Each one staring, eyes glinting, waiting. "No," she whispered, fear curling inside her gut. The figures began to move, more of them surging forward, their grotesque forms blending into a mass of limbs and empty smiles. They were no longer just distant shadows, they were here. And as Sarah felt her heart lurch again, a deeper, more horrifying question emerged: what if it wasn't just about escape or survival? What if they wanted something much worse? In the stillness, as the figures drew closer, a sharp, echoing crack shattered the silence. A tree fell, and with it, the last vestige of hope. "Mom!" Ethan cried as the darkness surged around them. And then, everything went black. What now awaited them in this nightmare? Would they find a way out or become part of the call that beckoned from the shadows? The darkness clung to them thick and oppressive, as though it had substance, swallowing Sarah and her children whole. She felt paralyzed, fear knotted tight in her chest, an icy hand squeezing her heart. Time lost all meaning, as the shadows shifted like black water beneath a fractured sky. Suddenly, a whisper sliced through the blackness, soft yet commanding. "Join us." The voice was everywhere, echoing, shifting around her. It taunted, stirring something primal buried deep within. "You won't be alone anymore." "No." Sarah shouted, desperation fueling her voice. "Get away from us." She grit her teeth, dragging the kids with her, forcing herself to remember who she was. A mother, a protector. They had to escape. Ethan tightened his grip on her hand, fear quaking in his breaths. "Mom, where are we?" "Shoo. Just follow me." Sarah barked. She pushed forward, instinct keeping her moving, despite the disorienting darkness that twisted their path. But the whispers gathered strength, wrapping around her mind like tendrils of smoke, thick and suffocating. A flicker of light danced ahead. A faint glimmer, almost like a beacon. "There!" she shouted, a wave of hope surging through her. But even as she ran toward it, dread gnawed at her stomach. What if it was a trap? What if their pursuers were toying with them? As they reached the light, reality blurred. The clearing she had seen before was now awash with an eerie glow, illuminating twisted trees with grotesque faces. They grinned, mocking, as a soft keening rose from them, weaving into the air like a serpent. "Help us! Help us!" A chorus of voices wailed, unervingly familiar. "Join us! You belong!" Lily screamed, burying her face in Sarah's arm. "Mom! I don't like this. Please. They're lying." Sarah shouted back. "Just stay close." But the more they fought against it, the more that sensation of dread crept in. "Why are they calling? Who are they?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling, muffled against the intensity surrounding them. Sarah's mind raced. She could feel the shift in the air, a heavy pulse thrumming, like the beat of a heart grown restless. The warmth of hope drained from her veins, replaced by an icy certainty. There was no sanctuary. They were surrounded. Without warning, the shadows lunged forward, sweeping across the ground like a wave, engulfing the light and plunging them into total dark once more. Sarah barely had time to react. She tossed herself protectively around her children, but the heat of breath brushed her neck. The whispers grew louder, clawing at her sanity. "Embrace us!" A sudden jolt erupted as a figure tore through the rank blackness, brushing against her arms like a moth drawn to flame. The flash of its face chilled her blood, a grinning visage, hollow eyes glinting with savage glee. "Join us!" it hissed, filling the air with putrid breath. "Run! Run!" she shouted, and they surged back into motion, feet pounding against the dark earth, branches tearing at their clothes as they fought against the tangible fear that wanted to drag them into the abyss. But the more they ran, the thicker the shadows grew, and the voices spiraled deeper. Sarah felt her limbs growing weak, her breath quickening. "Mom! I can't breathe!" Ethan gasped. Focusing, Sarah turned, spotting a flicker of that unholy glow. The radio, tangled and glowing like a demon's eye, flickering on the ground nearby. "There! We need to get to it." They stumbled forward, shaking the shadows off with sheer will, the air thick and suffocating as they reached the glowing relic. With shaking hands, she lunged for it, hoping, praying. But as her fingers grazed its cold surface, a bone-chilling laugh erupted around them, wrapping tighter until she could hardly breathe. "What have you done?" The shadows cooed, now in perfect harmony, the radio's glow illuminating their hollow smiles. "You think you can escape?" And as she looked to Ethan and Lily, their faces twisted in terror, the chilling realization flooded over her. The radio was the key, yes, but also a curse. What had she unleashed upon them all? Suddenly, the world flipped, the ground undulating beneath her feet. "Mom! What is happening?" Lily cried out, her wide eyes filling with fear. The laughter crescendoed, joining the whispers in a dark symphony as the shadows thickened. As the darkness converged, a piercing scream cut through the laughter. Coming from the radio? The static twitched violently, crackling with a voice that chilled her to the core. "You have been chosen and you will never leave." As everything around them echoed that dire proclamation, Sarah felt her grip on reality slipping, the pull of the shadows wrapping her in their cold embrace. What were the shadows? What did they want? As the world twisted again, she realized with horror they were no longer mere figures. They were something worse, something that had always been there and was waiting for her to find them, and in that moment, she understood nothing would prepare them for the revelation that awaited beyond the veil of night. What awaited them in the depths of horror? Could they break the bond that was forming, or were they destined to be mere echoes in the darkness? The ground swallowed them into a sudden, dizzying silence, the laughter and whispers abruptly snuffed out like candlelight. Sarah clutched her children tighter, her heart racing as uncertainty gnawed at her. She could barely comprehend where the fear had gone, leaving behind a hollow echo that reverberated in her mind. "Mom!" Ethan's voice broke through, tremulous and small. "What just happened?" "I don't know." Her breath came in shallow gasps. "I don't know, but we have to move." Panic surged again as the shadows shifted, reassembling themselves. The air felt heavy and thick, pregnant with foreboding. A shiver danced at the nape of Sarah's neck, she could almost feel them closing in, the eyes of darkness watching. "Look, there." Lily pointed, her voice quaking as she fought to stay calm. A faint light flickered beyond the oppressive mass around them, pulsing like a heartbeat. "Let us go," Sarah urged. They moved toward the light with clumsy, hurried steps, the desperate urge to escape outweighing their instinct to flee. The light revealed a path hidden among gnarled roots and cracked earth, glowing brightness fighting against the encroaching shadows. As they pressed on, tendrils of darkness snapped at their heels. Each step felt like an act of defiance against an inseparable dread gnawing at her senses. "Mommy, I can still hear them," Lily whimpered, tugging at her sleeve. There in my head the shadows pulsed like a living entity, weaving around them, but the light was their promise, their salvation. "It's okay, sweetie. They can't hurt you. Just focus on me," Sarah shouted, forcing down her own terror. As they neared the source, the flicker resolved into a grotesque, old radio, its dial spinning wildly. It sat on the ground, almost too inconspicuous against the chaos. Out of instinct, Sarah reached for it, drawn by the violent, crackling energy pouring from it. A frantic broadcast rattled through, a chilling recitation of despair. "Turn back. Turn back. The chosen shall be claimed," echoed a voice that simmered with malicious laughter. One by one, "they join us." The word sent a jolt of terror through her veins, and she stumbled backward, yanking her children close. "No!" she shouted with raw anguish. "We're not part of this." But the radio hummed, louder now, vibrating with sinister power. The howling wind around them grew fierce, mist curling out like fingers reaching. Suddenly, the radio began to distort, fractures of static cutting through clarity. A figure coalesced from the shadows, its form twisting grotesquely, looming just behind them. It wore a semblance of humanity, a face twisted into a smile that bared teeth in a way that promised madness. "Embrace your destiny," it hissed, stretching bony fingers like a lover's caress. "The darkness welcomes you." With primal instinct firing her limbs, Sarah shouted, "Run! Go!" And they sprinted, hearts pounding with fear as an anguished wail split the air, a noise that sounded disturbingly familiar. Ethan cried out, "Moem! What if they catch us?" "Keep going. Don't stop." But as they bolted down the path, it twisted and turned erratically, bending back toward that cursed radio which summoned the shadows like moths to a flame. Panic rose. Were they escaping or simply running in circles? Then, out of the corner of her eye, Sarah saw movement, a cluster of dark figures emerging from the they left behind, writhing and screaming. They edged toward the light, drawn by some horrifying magnetism. What do they want? Ethan gasped, breathless and pale. Sarah's heart thundered, dread pooling in her stomach. They want us. The radio blared louder still, the chaos reinforcing the shadow's will. Every noise felt like 1,000 whispers, chilling her to the core. You cannot. Slipping through the terror that clutched at them, Sarah managed to snatch the radio from the ground, determined to break whatever hold it had. But the moment her fingers brushed the surface, something inside struck back, a pain so deep it stole her breath, and the entire world erupted into chaos. "Mom!" Lily screamed, and then nothing but darkness. Again, thick as pitch. Was this the end? Or a doorway into something worse? As Sarah's vision faded, a new voice whispered within the void, deeper than the shadows surrounding them. The worst is yet to come. What had she unleashed? Would they ever find their way back, or would they fade into the very darkness they feared? As Sarah's consciousness flickered like a dying bulb, the darkness squeezed tighter, wrapping itself around her thoughts until the weight became unbearable. Then, suddenly, she was falling. The sensation pulled her back, propelling her and her children into a world painted in shades of gray, shadowed by a smothering mist. The air was cold, a chill that seeped through her skin and numbed her bones. "Mom!" Ethan's voice echoed faintly, distorted by the thick fog that surrounded them. "Where are we?" "I don't know. Just hold on to me," Sarah cried, her voice bouncing back as if the shadows themselves were mocking her. Panic clawed at her heart as she grasped at the air, searching for her children. She could feel their little hands slipping, the weight of fear anchoring her down. "Mommy!" Lily whimpered, her small voice breaking the suffocating silence like a fragile glass shattering. "Stay close. Just stay close," Sarah yelled, gritting her teeth as she felt the ground shift beneath her feet, the landscape morphing into something unnatural, grotesque shapes looming out of the mist, shapes that whispered they were here. Turn back," the radio's voice slithered into her mind, now a haunting mantra that echoed from the depths of her being. "No. We can't," Sarah shouted defiantly, wanting to drown out the whispers that wrapped around her thoughts. "We want." But shadows with hollow eyes peeked out from the mist, pulling themselves forward. Their mouths moved in sync with the radio's chant. "The chosen shall be claimed." Join us. In a fit of desperation, Sarah lunged forward, pulling her children with her. The thudding of her heart roared in her ears, drowning everything out. Every fiber of her screamed to escape, but the fog felt sticky, as if it wanted to drag them back into its clutches. "Mom!" Ethan cried, his grip loosening. "I can't see. Where's the light?" "It's right here." Sarah flailed, trying to pinpoint where that flickering light could possibly come from. "Hold on, we're going to find it." Just as hope began to surface, the ground beneath them convulsed violently. The mist spiraled, shrouding them in a new kind of darkness. Sarah stumbled, her breath hitching in her throat. A muffled screech pierced the air, not from her children, but something deeper. Something that made her skin crawl. "Mommy, what was that?" She inhaled sharply, shaking her head. "I don't know, but we have to keep moving." But the shadows moaned, weaving closer. The shapes pulsated like grotesque jellyfish, their limbs undulating as if inviting them into an embrace. And that voice, that taunting voice, grew louder. "You can't escape your fate." Before she could react, the ground split at her feet. She felt gravity shift, and they stumbled, losing their footing. The chilling void rose up to swallow them whole. Helplessly, she screamed, "Ethan! Lily!" As they fell into the abyss, the world twisted and turned until everything blurred into nothingness. Moments stretched into an eternity, fear mingling with the harsh chill of the unknown. Finally, the sensation ceased, and they landed with a thud on the cold ground. Sarah blinked rapidly, disoriented. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the radio crackling. Shakily, she stood, her heart hammering in her chest. Ethan. Lily. She called out, scanning the darkness that rushed in around them. Mommy. Their voices wafted through the black, fragile and vulnerable. Sarah's blood turned to ice as she turned toward the sound. Something else echoed back, something deeper, something that felt wrong. You're not alone, it whispered, reverberating through her soul with dreadful familiarity. Her breath caught as she recognized a face emerging from the shadows, a face she had hoped never to see again. Is that you? Sarah whispered, terror lacing every syllable. What had she awakened? How deep did this darkness go? For the first time, doubt pierced through her defiance. The light flickered somewhere beyond, but would they ever reach it before the darkness consumed them? The figure unfolded from the shadows, its features sharpened by the dim light that flickered like a dying star. Sarah's heart sank as the unmistakable face of her late husband emerged, twisted into a grin that both warmed and chilled her spirit. Mark, she barely whispered, the name trembled on her lips. A strange echo of hope suffused her but was quickly sliced by the remembered grief. Is it really you? He stepped closer, his movements smooth yet unnatural. Sarah, you've come for me, he said, voice dripping with an unsettling sweetness that chilled her more than the fog. You shouldn't have fought the darkness. It was always meant to embrace you. Where are the kids? Sarah snapped back, every instinct in her screaming that this wasn't him. The air felt thick, the shadows whispering around her, laughter threading through their hiss. They're safe for now, he turned, beckoning with a long, bony finger. The mist swirled, the shadows writhing as if they had a life of their own. Don't listen to him, shouted Ethan, breaking through the oppressive silence. Sarah's heart surged as she spotted him behind a twisted tree that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Mom, help us. He isn't real. You think you know fear? Mark's voice echoed, slipping through the thick fabric of the darkness. But you've only begun to understand. Sarah's legs felt heavy, paralyzed with confusion and grief. She wanted to lunge for her children, but as she approached, the shadows thickened around her, coiling like serpents, constraining her movement. The face of her husband remained hauntingly persuasive, reminding her of the warmth and safety she had lost. Let them go. She cried, her voice cracking as terror clutched her throat tightly. You're not him. You're just part of this awful nightmare. Am I? Mark leaned closer, his eyes impossibly vast, as if absorbing her very soul. You carry guilt, Sarah. You always did. This is your place now. With an abruptness that stole her breath, he lunged forward, and she felt the shadows close in around her, smothering any chance of escape. Mommy. Mom. Lily's scream tore through her thoughts, mingling with the abominable whispers that told her to join them, to give in. Hold on, Lily. Hold on. Sarah screamed, pounding against the oppressive dark, clawing toward the glimmers of her children's panicked forms. The light flickered again, a solitary beacon in the oppressive mist. But the moment she reached for it, the shadows convulsed violently, dragging her down, deeper into despair. You'll never escape. The voices chanted, a victorious chorus proclaiming her defeat. Panic surged through Sarah, mixing with desperation as she grappled with the paralyzing fear that threatened to crush her. Join us, surrender. The shadows rippled around her, whispering promises she couldn't understand but could feel in her bones. No. The fire of self-preservation propelled her forward. With a wild reach, she grasped at the rapidly fading light ahead, demanding it pull her children along with her as she screamed, "We want to be yours." But then came the sudden chill, a silence that expanded like a balloon before bursting into horrific screams all around her. Mom! A quiet cry lingered amidst the chaos, faint yet piercing. The mist fell silent for a heartbeat, then erupted as if in fury. They are not with you, they don't belong to you. The ground beneath her trembled, and once more Sarah felt the familiar pull of the abyss, tightening around her until it felt like her chest would burst. As the light flickered one last time, she glimpsed her children's terrified faces, staring at her from just beyond the veil of darkness. "Mommy, where are you?" And then there was nothing but echoing silence, the shadows swallowing her scream as she reached for them, their cries fading into the void. What had she unleashed? Why did the darkness seem so eager to claim them? Just as all hope began to evaporate, a new unsettling voice hummed from the depth of the shadows. "Welcome back, Sarah, it's time to meet the ancients." The air hung heavy, an oppressive blanket of dread suffocating any flicker of hope. Sarah's heart pounded painfully in her chest, a metronome of despair against the backdrop of shadows that swirled menacingly around her. She felt like a puppet, strings tugged by unseen hands, and the darkness whispered seductions of surrender that clawed at her sanity. "Mom! Where are you?" cried Ethan again, each call a dagger in her soul. "Stay with me. I'm coming." She shouted fiercely, though the words felt more like a promise to herself than an assurance to her children. As she struggled against the tidal wave of shadows gnashing at her edges, a glimmer of light caught her eye. It pulsed and beckoned like a ghost from the other side, the last vestige of safety, but was it merely an illusion crafted by the darkness? With a fierce cry, Sarah pushed herself toward the glow, her feet flying over the gnarled roots that sprang from the earth like grasping hands. "I'm coming. I'll get you," she screamed, refusing to allow the shadows to reclaim what was hers. The whispers rose around her, chanting a symphony of seduction, each word laced with memories of failure, guilt, and abandonment. "You don't want to fight, Sarah," the echoes hissed. "You belong to us now." Ignoring the specters of her past, she charged ahead, each heartbeat a war drum pounding a rhythm of resistance. With every anguished step, the shadows pressed closer, grasping her limbs, stealing her breath. "This isn't happening," she gasped, desperately clawing through the phantoms that sought to wrap around her like a web. Suddenly, she stumbled into the clearing, a kaleidoscope of swirling gray mist and distorted light. It felt intimate and sinister, filled with faces eerily familiar yet obscured by the shadows of their regrets. "Join us," the figures whispered, their voices a chilling harmony of despair. Fear gripped Sarah's heart, but the love for her children ignited a beacon of bravery within her. "Get away from them," she roared. "I want to let you take my family." The words exploded from her mouth, ricocheting against the suffocating void as if shattering glass. Their howls reverberated through her, a chorus of threats and taunts mixing with her resolve. Every ounce of energy surged through her as she burst forth, reaching for the flickering light that threatened to vanish. "Mom! Help!" Ethan screamed, and without thinking, her body surged forward, propelled by raw panic. The shadows thrashed violently as if angry at her defiance, but fueled by an adrenaline rush, she pressed on. One last push, she clawed her way through the darkness and tore towards the radiant glow. Then, just as she was nearly there, a figure darted forward, a twisted silhouette with hollow eyes and a ghostly grin. "You can't escape," it screeched, but Sarah was done listening. With renewed vigor, she lunged for the light, clutching it desperately as she could feel the shadows retreating. As her hands gripped the radio, the entire world froze. The air crackled, time bending as the ominous presence shrieked, "You've awakened what should remain slumbering." The shadows lurched back, and for a moment, everything went silent, but in that silence, something shifted. The radio pulsed out a powerful, vibrant sound, resonating with every part of Sarah's being. Memories struck her: laughter, warmth, the mornings spent with her kids, the fleeting moments of joy that knitted them together as a family. "This light belongs to us," Sarah shouted, forcing her voice through the fog. "We will not relent." With the power of every heartbeat, every ounce of hope, she willed the light to burst outwards. A blinding flash engulfed the clearing, piercing through the shadows, scattering the figures like ash in the wind. The darkness howled, a chaotic symphony of rage and loss. But she pressed on. "Hold on. I'm almost there," she screamed, pulling her children towards her. "Take my hand. We are together always." The moment the warmth of their fingers intertwined with hers, the shadows recoiled, hissing, "No. This can't be." Suddenly, the dark melted away, releasing them from its suffocating grasp. Sarah blinked as sunlight bathed her face, hot and bright, illuminating the world that had felt so lost. She was standing by a tree alive, breathless, and cradling her children tight in her arms. They were free. Mom Ethan's voice trembled as they slowly registered their reality. She glanced down, relief flooding through her like a tide as she met their terrified but hopeful gazes. "Where are we?" "The sun," Lily whispered, eyes wide. "Is it really gone?" "Yes," Sarah muttered, holding them tighter. "It's gone. But we're together." And as they emerged into the clearing, the shadows faded into mere wisps, haunted remnants of what they had faced. With every ounce of her spirit, Sarah vowed to remember. To be vigilant, not just of the darkness outside, but the shadows that lurked in their minds. The fears that could whisper doubts even in the softest moments. "Let us go home," she said, finally in control, and they walked hand in hand, stronger and more united than ever. The forest behind them whispered its final cries, but they didn't look back. They had reclaimed their lives and their courage to face tomorrow. As they stepped out of the woods, sunlight scattered across their path, illuminating a new dawn. This is your moment, to take a stand against the fears that haunt you. If you've enjoyed this heart-racing conclusion, you need to subscribe now for more exclusive stories. Smash that like button to show your support and help our community grow. Flood the comments section with your reactions, theories, and what you thought about Sarah's journey. And don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful ending. The darkness can only thrive if we let it. Let us stand united.